3 restoration companies had told Corinne Halstead that her late father's engine was ruined. The largest estimate reached $500,000 and included a polished new interior, flawless paint, and enough replacement metal to erase almost every mark he had left behind. Merrick Sloan listened to the starter for 6 seconds. Then the single father removed a burned ignition condenser no larger than a coin, asked his daughter to bring him the blue parts box, and installed a replacement. The midnight blue fastback started on the first turn. Corinne stared at the car, then at the invoice Merrick placed on its dusty fender. $15. But the number was not what silenced her. Beneath the hood, protected under 40 years of grease, Merrick had uncovered a child-sized fingerprint beside one word written in faded yellow pencil. Cora. It was the name her father had called her before grief made both of them stop speaking. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Merrick Sloan believed old cars should be questioned before they were corrected. His garage occupied a converted brick firehouse at the edge of a small Massachusetts river town. The tall doors still carried scratches from engines that had left the building before he was born. Inside, sunlight crossed concrete floors, hand tools hung in careful rows, and a faded blue metal parts box sat beneath his main workbench. His 10-year-old daughter, Pippa, spent summer mornings there. She inventoried washers, photographed parts before Merrick removed them, and did her reading at a desk made from an old work table. Merrick never called her his assistant. She had appointed herself. 3 years earlier, Pippa's mother had died after a sudden illness. Merrick had stopped taking large restoration contracts because they consumed nights and weekends. He repaired ordinary cars, conserved a few historic ones, and closed the garage in time to cook dinner. He earned less. He also knew what his daughter's day had contained. The midnight blue fastback arrived on a covered transporter on a rainy Tuesday. It was a 1967 model with original paint, a black vinyl interior, and a narrow brass key tag worn smooth at the edges. Dust dulled the body, but the lines remained beautiful. A shallow dent marked the passenger door. The steering wheel leather had been repaired with dark blue thread. Corinne Halstead arrived behind it. At 36, she controlled the family's precision manufacturing company and the estate of her father, Arden Halstead. Financial magazines described her as an heiress because the word was shorter than explaining the 12-hour days, debt refinancing, and 300 employees whose paychecks depended on her decisions. She wore a structured cobalt coat over an ivory silk blouse, tailored black trousers, and burgundy heels unsuitable for a working garage. She did not complain about the floor. "I need it ready for the memorial exhibition in 6 weeks," she said. Merrick walked around the car without touching it. Ready to run, ready to drive, or restored? Corinne hesitated. The auction director who accompanied her answered first. Concours condition. Every visible defect corrected. Merrick looked at the dent in the passenger door. "Do you know how it happened?" Corinne's jaw tightened. "No." The auction director opened a leather folder. 3 prestigious shops had submitted plans. Each assumed the engine had seized during 18 years of storage. The most expensive proposed a complete drivetrain rebuild, new wiring, new interior, bare metal repaint, and replacement of several hand-fabricated panels. Corinne had offered up to $500,000. She wanted the car to look the way it had before her father became ill. More honestly, she wanted it to look like proof that nothing between them had been left unfinished. Merrick asked for 1 hour to diagnose it before discussing restoration. The auction director called that unnecessary. Corinne agreed. Pippa placed rubber wheel chocks behind the tires and photographed the engine bay from 4 angles. Merrick checked the oil, removed the spark plugs, and turned the crankshaft carefully by hand. It moved. He measured compression, inspected the cylinders with a small camera, and found no evidence of a seized engine. The fuel in the tank was unusable, so he connected a safe temporary supply. The starter worked. The engine still would not fire. "No spark," Pippa said from a respectful distance. Merrick nodded. The ignition points had been cleaned before storage, The coil tested within range. Then he removed the distributor cap and found a small condenser with heat discoloration near its lead. He opened the blue parts box. Inside were simple components in paper sleeves, each purchased for jobs that had never needed them. The matching condenser had cost $14.80. Merrick installed it. He checked for leaks, positioned an extinguisher nearby, and asked everyone to stand clear. Then he turned the key. The engine coughed twice. On the third turn, it settled into an uneven but living idle. Corinne moved toward the car as if someone had called her childhood name. The auction director stared at Merrick. "That cannot be the entire problem." "It is the reason it would not start," Merrick said. "The brakes, tires, hoses, seals, and fuel system still need careful work before anyone drives it." He shut the engine down after less than a minute. Then he wrote an invoice. The auction director glanced at it and laughed once. "You forgot 3 zeros." Merrick gave the page to Corinne. The total was $15. She looked offended rather than relieved. "I am not asking for charity. I am not offering it. You authorized diagnosis. The failed part cost $15. That is today's bill. And your time? I do not charge a $500,000 lesson for 6 seconds of listening." Pippa covered a smile by rearranging tools. Merrick returned to the open hood. He had noticed yellow grease pencil beneath the grime near the radiator support. He softened the dirt with conservation cleaner instead of scraping it away. Letters emerged slowly. Cora. Beside them sat the whorl of a small fingerprint pressed into old primer. Corinne stepped closer. Her father had called her Cora until her mother died. After that, he used Corinne, the same way he used formal titles at work. She touched nothing. "I made that print," she said. "I was 8. He let me help fit the hood." Merrick looked toward the auction director's plan for fresh paint. "A perfect restoration will remove it." For the first time that morning, Corinne did not know what she wanted him to do. Corinne canceled the transport back to the auction facility. She asked Merrick for a conservation proposal instead. He agreed on 3 conditions. Safety work would come first. Every original mark would be photographed before anything changed, and no one would authorize cosmetic replacement without understanding what it would erase. The auction director objected to all 3. Corinne signed anyway. For the next 2 weeks, the fastback remained in the old firehouse. Merrick replaced cracked brake hoses, rebuilt the master cylinder, cleaned the fuel tank, changed hardened seals, and fitted period-correct tires. He preserved the faded paint and repaired only active corrosion. Every removed part went into a labeled tray, and Pippa photographed its position. Corinne began visiting after work. At first, she stood outside the taped line in her expensive shoes and answered messages. Then Pippa handed her a cotton swab and showed her how to clean the brass key tag without polishing away its wear. "Why keep scratches?" Corinne asked. Pippa considered the question. "Because that is where hands were." Merrick heard it from beneath the dashboard. He thought of the kitchen table at home, marked by Pippa's crayons and his late wife's hot coffee cups. He had almost refinished it after the funeral. Pippa had asked him not to make it look like nobody had lived there. He left the rings. Corinne's wound was different. Her mother had died when Corinne was 13. Arden had responded by working longer hours and spending late nights in the garage. He could explain compression ratios, paint thickness, and the sound of a loose bearing. He could not explain sorrow to his daughter. Corinne interpreted the car as the place he chose instead of her. She left for boarding school, then university, then the company's European office. Father and daughter communicated through reports, assistants, and holiday dinners measured in minutes. When Arden became ill, Corinne returned. They discussed succession plans. They never discussed the car. One evening, Merrick removed the rear seat to inspect a rust-prone seam. Pippa noticed that one upholstery clip did not match the others. It was newer and slightly bent. "Someone opened this after the car stopped driving," she said. Merrick checked the cavity with a light. Behind the seat was a flat oilcloth packet. He did not open it. He called Corinne. She arrived 20 minutes later without her coat, hair loosened by the wind. Inside the packet were 12 photographs, a thin notebook, and a cassette tape sealed in a plastic sleeve. The photographs showed Corinne from ages 7 to 13 working beside her father. In one, she held the steering wheel while the car rested on stands. In another, she pointed at the dent in the passenger door and laughed. The notebook explained the dent. Corinne had opened the door into a stone post on the first morning Arden let her sit in the driver's seat. He had refused to repair it. Not because he was angry, because she had cried until he told her that machines could carry mistakes without becoming worthless. Corinne sat on a rolling shop stool and read the line twice. The cassette required an old player. Merrick had one in the office because the garage's original owner had recorded engine notes on tape. The belt slipped, so Pippa fetched a rubber band from her school box and helped Merrick make a temporary drive. Arden's voice arrived beneath static. He did not deliver a perfect final apology. He admitted that after his wife died, he had hidden inside work because machines asked easier questions than children. He said the fastback had never been his alone. Corinne had selected the blue paint, stitched the first steering wheel repair, and left her fingerprint under the hood. He had stored the car because he could not decide whether returning it would comfort her or reopen the years he had wasted. His final request was simple: do not make it new. Make it safe enough for her to choose where it goes. Corinne removed the cassette before the message ended. She walked outside into the alley behind the garage. Merrick gave her space. Pippa started to follow, but he stopped her gently. Some grief needs a door it can close. Corinne returned 10 minutes later. Her eyes were dry, but she held the brass key tag in both hands. The auction contract requires concours presentation, she said. If I withdraw the car, the estate pays a penalty. Can the estate afford it? Yes. Then the real question is whether you can afford to let strangers erase it. She looked at him for a long moment. No one in her company spoke to her that directly. Merrick was not impressed by her money, but he was also not punishing her for having it. He treated the choice as hers and expected her to carry it. The auction director arrived the next morning with an appraiser and a photographer. He argued that Merrick's conservation approach would leave the car visibly imperfect and reduce its spectacle at the memorial exhibition. The appraiser examined the original paint, dated hardware, hand repairs, notebook, and photographic record. Her conclusion was quieter. The car's value came from documented originality. Replacing everything would not only erase family history, it could also destroy the strongest evidence of provenance. The auction director had not acted fraudulently. He had been hired to create a flawless sale object, and that was what he planned to deliver. Corinne realized she had asked the wrong professional the wrong question. She terminated the restoration clause, paid the contractual penalty, and kept the exhibition date. The car would appear exactly as conserved. But 2 days before the event, the company's trustees challenged her decision. The fastback belonged to the estate, not to Corinne personally. Unless she proposed a use consistent with Arden's charitable instructions, they could still order its sale. Corinne spent that night in Merrick's office with the notebook open between them. Arden's estate directed a portion of his collection toward technical education. The language was broad. It did not mention the fastback, but it allowed historically significant equipment to support apprenticeships. Corinne wanted to place the car inside the company lobby. Merrick asked who would be allowed to touch it. She had no answer. Pippa, doing a mathematics worksheet at the other desk, looked up. Cars get lonely if they only become furniture. Corinne smiled for the first time that night. They built a proposal around that sentence. The fastback would anchor a small preservation apprenticeship for students who could not afford private trade programs. They would learn documentation, electrical diagnosis, safe brake work, upholstery repair, and the difference between conservation and replacement. The car would remain owned by the estate and could not be sold without independent trustee approval. Corinne funded the first year from her personal inheritance rather than company money. Merrick refused to run the program as a favor. He submitted a budget, insurance requirements, student limits, and a market-rate teaching fee. The trustees interviewed 2 other garages before selecting his. That mattered to both of them. At the memorial exhibition, the fastback stood beneath clean white lights with its original midnight blue paint, passenger door dent, blue thread steering wheel repair, and small fingerprint protected beneath the hood. The old condenser rested inside a plain, clear case beside the blue parts box. There was no dramatic speech about a heroic mechanic. Corinne spoke briefly about incomplete things. She said her father had mistaken silence for strength and perfection for repair. She had inherited both habits. Preserving the car did not erase what had gone wrong between them, but it allowed truth to remain visible beside love. Merrick listened from the edge of the room with Pippa. When the trustees approved the apprenticeship, no crowd erupted. A few parents asked practical questions. 3 local students filled out interest forms. An older mechanic offered to donate measuring tools. The work began the following month. Corinne attended the first Saturday without photographers. She traded her heels for burgundy work boots and learned how to test voltage without scratching a terminal. Pippa corrected the way she held the meter probes. Merrick did not rescue her from small mistakes. He showed her how to correct them. Their connection grew through ordinary repetition. Corinne brought coffee and remembered that Merrick took his without sugar. Merrick kept an extra pair of safety glasses in her size. She listened when he talked about the fear of raising Pippa alone. He listened when she admitted that finding her father's message had not created instant forgiveness. "It made him honest too late," she said. "Late honesty still leaves work for the living," Merrick replied. Neither of them confused that work with romance. During the apprenticeship, he was a paid contractor, and she represented the estate. Their meetings remained public, scheduled, and focused on students. 6 months later, the first program ended. All 8 students completed a documented conservation project. 4 entered paid apprenticeships elsewhere. 2 enrolled in community college automotive programs. 1 decided she preferred industrial design. Another discovered that careful photography was as important as a wrench. Corinne renewed the program through the trustees. Merrick declined the second teaching contract because the garage's ordinary customers needed him. He recommended one of the older volunteer mechanics, who was hired after the same interview process. Only then did Corinne ask Merrick to dinner. She did it while standing beside the fastback after everyone else had left. "No budgets," she said. "No trustees. No invoices." Merrick glanced toward the office, where Pippa was pretending not to listen. "One condition." Corinne raised an eyebrow. "Somewhere without white tablecloths." They ate at a riverside diner where the menus were laminated and the pie was better than either expected. They moved slowly after that. Corinne did not try to purchase ease for Merrick and Pippa. Merrick did not make her wealth into a character flaw. She learned the difference between helping and taking control. He learned that independence could become another way of refusing to be known. Pippa remained the least romantic member of the arrangement. She approved of Corinne's work boots, distrusted her music, and required 3 successful pancake breakfasts before describing her as probably useful. A year after the $15 repair, the trustees approved the fastback for a supervised road day. Merrick completed the final safety inspection. The brakes held evenly. The fuel system was clean. The preserved engine ran with the soft mechanical unevenness Arden had recorded in his notebook decades earlier. Corinne sat in the driver's seat. Pippa took the passenger side, carrying the blue parts box on her knees. Merrick stood outside the open door with the brass key tag resting in his palm. Corinne hesitated before taking it. "What if I put another dent in it?" Merrick looked at the old mark beside her elbow. "Then make sure you remember where you were." She turned the key. The engine started immediately. They drove only through the closed training yard. Corinne shifted carefully, while Pippa called out cones with unnecessary authority. Merrick watched from the center line, arms folded, unable to hide his smile. Afterward, Corinne parked beside the open firehouse doors. She removed the first $15 invoice from the glove compartment. She had kept it there beneath her father's notebook, not as proof that Merrick had saved her money, but as proof that value and price were never the same thing. The failed condenser remained in its clear case. The fingerprint remained beneath the hood. The dent remained in the door. And when Merrick closed the garage that evening, Corinne and Pippa waited on the sidewalk while he turned the old brass lock. Nothing had been made perfect. Everything important had been allowed to remain.